barely worth going to the bank. Interest on savings is almost zero, at just 0.01%. That means that he gets 1 cent for every 100 euros per year. What's happening with his money? People are worried, says the director of the local branch of Volksbank, Elmar Schmitz. Although there hasn't been a run on the safe deposit boxes yet, there have been more requests to keep money in cash or gold.
We've seen a continuing fall in interest rates over the past 8 years. I'd need a crystal ball to tell you whether it'll stay like this for long. I think we'll have this situation for another 2 or 3 years. After that, things will change again. But we won't have the interest rates we had 10 or 20 years ago.
The manager knows who he blames for these low interest rates: the European Central Bank. The remit of the ECB is clear: price stability. It uses the base rate as its tool to deliver that, and it's been lowering the base rate steadily ever since the financial crisis, down to zero. Savers are left by the wayside, but countries with high levels of debt, such as Greece, are able to get their hands on cheap money. So too can ailing banks in southern Europe. The cheap money is supposed to fuel growth. By buying government bonds, the ECB has pumped additional trillions of euros into the markets. Otherwise, the system would face potential collapse. The price of all this is a deluge of money. The money has to go somewhere, into shares and real estate, which continue to rise in price. The result is a massive concentration of wealth right at the top. Bill Gates, the world's richest man, has a fortune of 65 billion euros. That's the market value of his shares. To compare, the total value of all of the world's cash is less than 100 times that amount, 5 trillion euros. The value of all goods and services created every year around the world is 75 trillion euros. That's the real economy. The world's debts are far higher than that. States, businesses and private individuals all have debts. A world living on credit. 705 trillion, that's the value of all derivatives, the speculative financial bets on the future. They've got almost nothing to do with real goods anymore. To recap, this is the fortune of Bill Gates. What happens when there's too much money in the world? Economist Max Otter says this deluge of cheap money isn't just flooding the big banks. He sees low interest rates as the symptom of a massive sickness in the global financial system. What's more, cheap money endangers the entire economy and promotes increasing levels of debt. He says those who believe that with the financial crisis of 2008 receding, things are now better again are much mistaken.
This influx of money is extremely dangerous. It's slow, but at some point the dam will burst and then we'll be in a huge crisis.
The biggest danger is that this flood of cheap money will split our society. It moves money from the bottom upwards, he says. A gigantic redistribution machine.
Low interest rates are demanded by many economists. They mean that states can borrow on the cheap. States can take on more debt. It also means the rich can do the same and often without any liability if they default. If I, as one of the super rich, buy a business, then I'm only liable to the extent of my holding, not with the rest of my wealth. That's a blatant injustice compared to middle-class families and regular people with home construction loans.
This flood of money doesn't just save states and banks, it also favors the rich, who use this cheap money to buy shares, companies and real estate with rapidly rising values, while the financial investments of ordinary people lose value.
The middle classes have savings and insurance policies, and these investments are the losers in a low interest rate world. Poorer citizens suffer because real estate prices are going up and therefore rents too.
London, the world's largest financial centre, illustrates very clearly the effect of this monetary deluge. Trillions are traded here. 300,000 employees in the financial sector are trying to turn money into even more money. London's own real estate prices are skyrocketing. All the major banks have offices here. This is where the money of the world's rich is invested. Roman Borisovich knows the scene well. There are neighborhoods where millionaires are being pushed out by billionaires. Borisovich is fighting against a sell-off of the City of London to speculators. Together with colleagues, he has researched the anonymous owners of several properties. As a former banker, he's familiar with price developments.
Well, these are used houses, and again, depending on the size, it's difficult to say how deep they are. But anywhere between 3 to 5, maybe 5 to 7 million in this particular area, 5 to 7 million pounds. Now, if you think about Mews houses, this is a family place. Just think about what kind of family can afford to buy a house for 3 to 5, even for 5 to 7 million pounds.
The expensive houses are all speculative objects and empty. London belongs to investors who don't live in the city. Roman Borisovich discovered that this townhouse was sold to a Ukrainian billionaire for £66 million. On paper, the mansion is owned by a shell company.
Right now, there is in excess of 40,000 properties in London that are owned by anonymous offshore corporations, meaning that we don't know who the owners are. They could be decent people, they could be mafia. Therefore, we suspect that a lot of this money that came through London, that exploded prices here, is actually of dirty origin.
There's construction underway everywhere. Speculating with real estate is the big game in town. Trillions of euros from Russians, Germans, Chinese and Indians have poured into London.
From socio-economic perspective, it is not sustainable. You cannot have a city where residents and workers cannot live. You know, this is the problem with bubbles, is that nobody knows when they're going to burst.
But London doesn't have a monopoly on real estate bubbles. They now exist in cities around the world.
If a real estate bubble were to burst, sure, it would hit the wealthy who are invested there. But they have a diverse investment portfolio. They seize opportunities around the world. If the real estate bubble in Munich were to burst, they'll be in Rio or Tokyo. They can act globally, but the middle class can't.
As seen in the financial crisis of 2008, the middle class is hit while the rich get richer in times of boom and bust. Not much has changed. The minor regulations introduced into the financial sector aren't very tangible here in London. The speculators are looking for new ways to make more money in the world's #1 financial centre. Many transactions are now taking place in the shadow banking system. The bonuses for lucrative deals are as plentiful as ever. And Brexit will see the regulations relaxed even further. The show must go on. Alf Townsend has lived through it all. He's been driving a taxi for 54 years, chauffeuring bankers and brokers around the city. Dealing in the world's trillions has become the trump card of the British economy, he says optimistically.
It's beneficial to London. I think it's various people who invest whatever part of the world they come from. If they want to invest their money in the city, that's good for the British economy, yeah?
Change Alf